Hi, and welcome to another video from Computer Security and Gadgets. Today's video is focusing on Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or RHEL, version 8, and we're going to run through and set it up an environment for us to train ready for a Red Hat Certified System Administrator exam or the Red Hat Certified Engineer exam. So just set up on VirtualBox, and this can be followed for Windows machines, but you also can do similar steps for Mac OS X as well as Linux, as long as you have Ubuntu, because that's the operating system supported on. So in regards to the system requirements, before we go ahead, we need a 64-bit x86 machine that has hardware virtualization assistance. It's quite easy to check that. It will probably pretty much stop you before you can install the application. So yeah, you'll soon get stuck there. For Red Hat Enterprise Linux itself, to virtualize it, you probably need at least 4 gig of RAM. Probably 8 gig is preferred. You can probably push it down even further if you need to, but obviously it's going to run pretty slow, and you probably want to look at not running a full GUI, especially if you're going to go lower RAM values. You also need at least 24 gig of space. That's coming from Red Hat. I would say at least 30 gig plus if you want to actually store any files as part of this. So yeah, essentially this will work for, this is for Windows, but you can follow roughly along with Mac OS X as well as Ubuntu and pretty much any other Linux distribution that it's supported on. Obviously you have to download and install it. Not based on this, but if you need to, the subsequent parts where we actually do the actual setup of the virtual machine within VirtualBox, it'll be all pretty much the same. So let's go ahead and download the two things we need to download. So the first thing will be obviously the Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 download. So the release, current release as of today, which is the 16th of the 1st 2021, is 8.3. so I will go ahead and download the DVD ISO. So the actual link you'll need is developers.redhat.com/product/rel/download. I'll put the link in the description below, of course. You may need to create a developer account, so I went ahead and actually registered for one quite a while back, and then once you've got one, you can actually use this to develop or do some training on Red Hat. So it's ideal. So it's the exact environment you're going to have the exam on. So this will be the best way to practice. So we can just click the download link here. It's the DVD ISO you want, so it's got everything in that, and it's around 9 gig in size, so it will take a little while to download. All these other architectures, it's unlikely you're using those, so it will just download. I've already downloaded it, so I won't download it again. So yeah, that's all that. And then for VirtualBox, that's just virtualbox.org, and if you go back to the home page here, this is the landing page. You've got a big download VirtualBox 6.1, and you've got the different packages here. So we've got Windows, OS X, Linux distributions, and Solaris hosts, if people still use Solaris out there. And obviously for this case, we're going to use Windows hosts, and it will download VirtualBox. Okay, so once you've got those two downloaded, you'll have the two files. So you have the VirtualBox installation XE or DMG or whatever it is for your different distribution. And then you have the ISO image, which should be around 9 gig in size. So now we just got to do the installation of the application. So it's just pretty much a next finish almost job. Be careful with the location. This is where the actual application will install, and it does use up a bit of space. So I'm just going to put that on my D drive quickly, because that's a larger drive. Just click next. Yeah, it's whether you not want to put it under quick launch. I don't normally, and if you start menu entries, that sort of stuff is normally normal. You can set that. Okay, so click next. It's going to interrupt your network interfaces, so if you're running a download or anything like that at this time, please do not do the installation at the same time, because it's going to cut your internet for a very small period of time, but that may break any downloads or anything that's not able to pause for any time. So I haven't got anything running, so I can proceed. Click install. You're going to get a prompt come up for UAC or user access control, and just click yes on that. It will then do the installation bits. It shouldn't take that very long. I'll just wait here. Okay, and that's now complete. So I can click to start the VM after installation. Please note I haven't bothered to install the VirtualBox extension pack. In my experience, I don't really use the features it offers, so such as USB devices. For these practices, we don't really use any USB devices, so I've not bothered. As well as stuff around access via RDP. We don't use RDP in Linux, so yeah, it's not really that useful for us. If you haven't already, you may get a warning about not having virtualization enabled. That will be something you have to do in the BIOS. So you may have to look at your particular vendor of your laptop or desktop PC or the different motherboards and have a look how the BIOS actually enables that. So it'll be something called hardware virtualization or something like that. You can look that up for your vendor. That should be available. If Hyper-V is already installed on a Windows device, you'll also need to uninstall that or disable it. Right, so let's go into VirtualBox. I've actually got one from previous installations, so we can go and create a new one. So that is machine and then new, and give it a nice description. I'll just do RHEL 8. And be careful where the machine folder is. So if you look here, mine's already defaulted to DVMs because I've actually set this up before. But if that's not where you want it to go, you can actually go into File Preferences here, and you've got the default machine folders here, and just set that to somewhere that's obviously got a bit more space. So machine new again, give it a name, RHEL 8. You can see it's already defaulted to the correct option, but if it hasn't, then just go Linux in a type, and then the version will be Red Hat 64-bit. Then click next. Okay, I've already got a. So what we need to do is either give it a different name or delete the old one. So I'll just call it Red Hat 8, and then just call it RHCSA because that's what I'm going to focus on here. So let's create a new one. They recommend a minimum of 4 gig here, so I've just given it 4096, which is 4 gig in megabytes. And just click next here. You can obviously give it more if you've got more, but because we're planning on running multiple machines at once, I wouldn't really want to give it any more than that. So now we're going to click, so it's going to create a virtual machine hard disks now. So the recommended size coming from Red Hat default is basically 8 gig, which is way too small. If you've got an existing virtual hard disk you want to overwrite, you can use that, of course. I wouldn't recommend that again. Create a new one and you'll be safe. Hard disk file type, leave by default one is absolutely fine unless you're going to use VMware or something like that later. So VHD I think is Hyper-V, and then VMDK is VMware, but VDI is what VirtualBox uses, so it's fine. I would leave that as dynamically allocated. We don't really need a fixed size because we're not running RAID arrays or anything crazy on this disk, so we leave it dynamically allocated. That's fine. We don't need performance really. As recommended, at least 30 gig, so I'm going to select actually 50, so I'll give myself a bit more room. Click create, and as I mentioned, because it's dynamically allocated, it won't actually allocate the whole 50 gig right now. It will just create the bare minimum it needs, and then as it uses, it will use it up. So you can set even higher and it will just use what it needs. So that's created. However, it's really not really set up yet. So if we go into the settings of this now, and we're going to go through all of these one by one. So advanced, so share clipboard and drag and drop, they're good things to have, so I would enable them bi-directional. Disk encryption we don't really need. We've got some things like floppy disk. Can turn that off. Optical drive should be above hard disk in this case because we're going to boot from a virtual optical disk. You can allocate a bit more processor if you want to. Leave that by default. Video memory, I would probably move that up if you can, because you've got some obviously it's going to try and load some kind of if you're using the GUI, you're going to have to load a GUI, so it's going to have some video memory to actually be able to do that. Remote displays, that sort of stuff we don't need. Storage in here, we need to under IDE, it's going to have an empty CD drive. If we click the little CD drive icon here and choose a disk file, we need to then browse for the actual virtual disk file here. So I've got the RHEL 8.3 DVD image, so just click open there. I don't have to worry about any of the other bits. Audio, if you want it, I probably don't need it, so I'll just disable audio. Network, I prefer to use a NAT network I've created. I will show you how to do that in a second. So I've just called it NAT network, very nondescript, and I've just given it to adapter 1, but obviously you can have multiple adapters if you wanted to. But for this, most likely we just need to create simple networks, so it'll be just a network and nothing else. Serial ports we don't need. USB we don't really need. Let's see how we go with all of that. That looks good. Okay, so all good so far. I'll just show you how to do the virtual network. So that was in preferences, then network, and if we click the little add button here, so we've got remove, configure and add. So if we click add, it's going to create one called NAT network 1. We can click configure and we can enable the network, and you've got network name, you've got a CIDR, you've got supporting DHCP or the IPv6, and you've got some port forwarding options here as well. So if I show you what I've done before on that network, so I've just got a network CIDR of 10.0.20 and then /24, so it just supports 254-ish addresses, and then we've got just some SSH rules in here. So if I connect with port 2218 from my local host, which is this host as a machine that's running it, it will actually translate that to the guest IP of 10.0.25.22. So I'll probably have to update this as part of this. So let me remove this second rule. Just have a single rule. We'll add that again. Probably edit that towards the end of this video to do the SSH. So let's just start the VM now, and then we can start the installation process. So it should now start up. Okay, so what you're going to get now is it's going to try and boot. First, it's going to try and do a test this media and install. It's up to you if you want to test the media. It takes quite a long time. I never bother unless it's going to be on production network. But yeah, for the sake of this, I'll just do an install. And we wait for the GUI to pop up. Sometimes the mouse behaves a bit odd in the installation, so you can actually go to devices, USB, find your USB device and actually just select that as the option. If you do that, it will basically lock out your USB device and just unplug it and plug it back in, but at least it works for the purposes of the installation. And then once you get out of that, then you can just put it by default. So this will work absolutely fine now, which is great. So let's first thing to go and find is the correct language. So I'm in Australia, so I'll just select English Australia and continue. So keyboard's been selected. Right, so we're not registered with that. Okay, so server with GUI. Right, okay, cool. Right, so what have we got so far? So we need to let's do network. Let's turn it on. It's got an address. It looks good. Give it a host name. Local, and just apply that. It looks good. So that's done. So that's now connected to internet. That should be easy because you've got that NAT network, so it should do network address translation automatically and use your existing internet connection. So it shouldn't be anything you have to do too crazy in there. Network time should be on, and then you've got just go and select where you are in the world. Melbourne, cool. So that's the time zone selected. Right, we've got keyboard, that looks good. We can try to connect. Yeah, so just enter your username and password in here. I'll just go and look mine up in the my password safe. Obviously I won't show these details here. So if it's all complete, then you should have a subscription attached. So you just click the register button, post. You've got that. Yeah, so you just click the register button once you're done, and you should get the system has been properly subscribed if all looks good. So that's great. It's got automatic partitioning. We'll just have a look. That's generally okay, to be honest. For the sakes of this, we probably want to play with that a bit more later on, but for the sake of this, again, we can let it do its what it's deciding to do. So it's fine. So just make sure that's the correct disk and all that. That's all good. I'm okay with that. Okay, software selection. So the things I would unselect in here, so server with GUI, I'll just unselect a web server. We don't want that. We don't want a mail server. Network services we don't really want as a server. Remote desktop clients, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Remote management interface, we can leave that on, doesn't matter. Network file system client, that's okay. File storage server, we don't want that either. We don't want InfiniBand. Virtualization client, that's fine. We don't want that either, actually. We'll leave that off. Performance tools, that's fine. Guest agents is fine. Virtual image management, we don't want that. Remote management for Linux, that's fine. We don't need that, doesn't really matter too much. Windows file server, allows share files between Windows, that's fine. Virtualization hypervisor, we don't need that because we're running it in a hypervisor already, so you can't really do that. FTP server, we don't want that. So that's it. So we just want the Windows file servers, fine. Debugging tools, remote management for Linux, a network file system client, performance tools, and guest agents. That's it. The rest of it is additional things. So we'll leave that there, and anything additional we can install as we go along. Just click done there. Okay, now it says root account. So a root account is essentially like the super administrator. They have pretty much complete unrestricted access to the system, and so for obvious reasons this password should be and must be the most secure password on your system. For the purposes of training, you don't really need it to be ultra complex, because you may need to use it sometimes. So just set some password and just make sure you don't forget it. That's all. My password isn't particularly strong, but it's saying it's strong, so that's all good. Okay, and now finally we want a user created. So you want a standard user that is able to sudo, so to be able to manage the system. So I'll create one with my name, so if I just do Colin England, that's me, and we'll require a password. I'll set a password. We'll have a look at what the advanced features are. You can set what the home directory is, you can set the GUIDs. I don't really care about that, that's fine. So we're going to be added to the world group. That will give us the administrative access as required, so we can do sudo to increase our privileges. Done. So I think that looks good. So I've got my keyboard, my language support, time and date set. Yep, we're registered with Red Hat. I've got the installation source, okay, on the CDN, that's fine. We've got server with GUI, we've got automatic partitioning. We don't need kdump because we're not really looking at again the production system. So kdump is to enable log in when we have a file system, a system crash, so like a kernel panic of some sort. That would log that. We don't need that. Network and host, so that's obviously set up the network. We've done that. Security policy, we don't need to do that. We're just going to let the default profile run out. Then we've got the root, set the root password, and we create a user. So we can begin the installation now and wait for a very long time. Okay, so once you get the it's all installed, you get a complete message like this. You've got a license agreement. Make sure you read that, as everyone does, of course. And you can just click reboot system. And because we've used the USB to trap our mouse essentially inside the installer, what I recommend now is just unplug your mouse and plug it back in to quickly get your mouse free. Okay, so your mouse should be back free as a bird post the removal and insertion and removal. It's just waiting for it to all boot up now. And yeah, once you finish rebooting, you're gonna get the license. So just read through the license. I just accept it. I'm just doing this with my keyboard actually because I've already disabled the mouse. I don't want to do it again. So yeah, all the entitlements. Yep. Subscription manager looks good. So I've accepted license and subscription manager is saying it's covered. So we can now finish. Just using tab to move around and press enter to actually select the option. Okay, so we should finally get it started up. And that's just by Control Alt and F3. So Control F3 will bring up the normal console. We'll just log in as root for now. Okay, so just for the sake of this, we're going to log in as root. So it's Control Alt F3 to then get into command line. So we don't really need the mouse for in the command line, thankfully. So this makes this a hell of a lot easier. So the very next thing to do is go ahead and insert the VirtualBox guest editions. So do devices, insert guest editions. So the first thing before we install the before we install VirtualBox on there, so we're going to do a DNF in group install. Might be already installed. I think we installed it as part of this anyway. So we've got development tools. If we haven't already installed it, so we'll use a DNF group install development tools to then go and grab all the different development tools. Let that install. Shouldn't take too long. We can accept that because it's from Red Hat. That's a valid signature. That's another signature from Red Hat. That's fine. So they've got two keys. In case one does expire, then they've got a second one they can use to sign the first one. Now we want to do utils-libelf-devel. So DNF install kernel development tools, and then elfutils-libelf-devel. That's the elfutils as a library development version. That I'll install those two. Kernel is already installed, so the kernel development tool is already installed, so that's why we didn't get that pop-up. Just do a mount. It's going to mount the so now we're going to mount the guest editions ISO, so mount dev cdrom and then just mmt, mounting as read only, that's fine. So now we're going to go into execute the thing, so just do cd mount. Let's have a look what we got here. Yep, that looks good. So now we just need to execute that file, so mount, we'll just run it like this, VBox, and then it's LinuxAdditions.run. So we'll just wait for that to install. So it's going to install some kernel modules. It's going to build them on the fly for the VirtualBox for this particular kernel. VirtualBox will actually build that for us, and then we should have full support, hopefully. So let's see how we go. Okay, there's no error message, so that looks very good. So that's installed nicely. Okay, so the final thing I'll just do while I'm here, let's get the SSH working. So if we just do an if config, we'll look for the interface that's not the virtual bridge interface. We should have a 10027. So that is what I need to set up in my port forwarding rules. So we go back to VirtualBox Manager, go into File Preferences, and then go to Network, NAT Network, port forwarding. We'll just remove this entry, create a new rule. So redhat 8 RHCSE, just do 1, that's the first server. Host IP will be 127.0.0.0.1, so it's your own host. Host port, we'll give it sync 4 2s. Guest IP, so it's 10.0.2.7, I think it was, wasn't it? Yep, 2.7, and the guest port will be 22, which is SSH port. Protocol is TCP always. So just click OK, OK, and OK. So we should now be able to use some kind of SSH client, something like Kitty on Windows or Putty. Probably people more familiar with Putty. On Linux and Mac, you can just use SSH. It's already there because it's they're Unix-based operating systems. So we can do 127.0.0.1 and then 2222 and click open. Click yes, because it's going to say just put potential security breach there because we don't recognize that address. We should be able to log in as one of our users. If that was my account, type the password correctly. There we go, so we're logged in. So that works nicely. So that's also how to set up SSH in there, okay? So the final thing to do is just reboot the system and check the mouse all works. And then we'll do one final action to make the system all ready to go. And that would be to do a snapshot. So if you do a snapshot at this point, if anything goes wrong at later points, we can just move back to this snapshot and we'll be back into a working state again. So it's probably a good way to ensure that if you do have issues at a later point, you've got that backup as you need it. So it does allow you can create multiple snapshots. So if there's also another, like a major upgrade or something like that you're going to undertake, you also do that snapshot. Also, don't forget, I have already forgot, it looks like, don't forget to do a DNF update to make sure your packages are up to date. I'll probably do that once this system's loaded. I'll just run through how to do that, but I won't. So now, if you look, my mouse works absolutely fine. Now you can see it changing between the two. If we now log in with my account, you can see that's working absolutely fine. So what I'll do, as I mentioned, let's just, I've got to do the welcome page. Forgot about all that. Yep, English Australia, next. Yep, using Australian keyboard. We don't want that. For location services, and we don't want automatic problem reporting, and we don't need to set that up, so that's all good. So this help page as well, go away. Okay, so now I'm just going to do a sudo dnf update and just log in with my password because I created myself as an administrator. That sorts that one out. Okay, so what I wanted to do, so it's all up to date, which is great, so that makes it nice and easy. We should auto resize guest display, so let's just make sure it does that. Yep, so sometimes it doesn't do that automatically, so just go view, auto resize guest display. Sometimes you have to turn it on and off to make it auto resize. So now that means if I make the screen smaller or bigger, it'll auto resize the actual screen display. So it takes a few seconds to come into effect. So what I'll do now finally is just shut down the system, do a power off, wait for it to completely shut down. We'll do a clone because I want to create a second machine, and this will be the client. So that'll be for our various things where we need to do tests and stuff like that. So yeah, so that will be generate new MAC addresses for network internet adapters, because we don't want to have the same MAC address and we're using that. So we're going to have a client, and so the server will be this RHCE. We're going to have the RHCE client as the second server. So that will generate that. We'll do a full clone. Okay, so that's cloned. We'll just rename that to I'll just rename it to server, so it's very clear. Okay, so we'll just do a snapshot. So to do a snapshot, we just go to where is it now? So yeah, it's not the most innovative place to put it, but if you click the three buttons here and just go to snapshots, we click this take one. So first one, we just give it a name. So we just do initial build, and then the date. Okay, and then just do a take. Shouldn't take very long because you shut down. If you do it while it's running, then it's gonna have to take a snapshot of the memory as well. So just do initial build post clone, and then 16.01.2021 and take. Cool. That is literally it. So obviously you can do that. We can bring this machine up, find out the IP with the ifconfig, and do the port forwarding as I mentioned before for the SSH. I won't bother that right now, and that's pretty much the environment ready for the RHCSA or the RHCSE exams now. Obviously you can create multiple clients if you needed to, so just keep cloning the server, or you can clone off the client as need be. So you can create as many as you want, but obviously it's displacement pending, etc. So that concludes the video. As always, I've popped on the screen now my Ko-fi page. That's a great place to donate if that's something you're interested in, to help support this channel. Also, I've put the TeePublic page for any merchandise I've got. So I've got a few t-shirts and stuff like that, if that's anything you're interested in. And finally, I've put my Discord server details, as well as in the description for these things, details, so you can chat there. I'll try and answer questions when I've got a spare few minutes, and try and help you out where I can. Thank you.